Very often we might end up getting our data from a third-party API, and let's simulate that a little bit. So we're going to put our component did mount, and this is where we would end up calling our fetch API. Component did mount is a method that is that we can end up putting on a React component. This will end up getting called when the component ends up mounting. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take this code. Instead of putting it here, we're going to try this, and we're going to say this.setState. Actually, no, I want to do it the other way. Sorry. So here, I'm just going to try initially to do this. And what I want to do is that when my component mounts, we're going to simulate the fact that we wouldn't have any data when our component ends up mounting. And you might think that you could just do something like this. But the problem is you can only set the state inside of the constructor. If you want to change the state, you can do it, but you have to call this set state. And this .set state takes an object with whatever values you want to end up changing on the state. The only thing that we're going to change are the numbers. And this would be what would happen if you ended up making a call to an API, but you'd also have a bit of a delay. So let's simulate that by doing a set timeout, which is something that the window object allows us to do. And let's just take a half a second delay and move this in here. So now let's go and run this again, and we'll see nothing for a half second until we see our data. So it's important that one of the things that you want to do is give your state values that make sense. Because if numbers didn't have a value, and we refresh this, we'd get an error. Because when it first loads, it's going to try to map over something that doesn't exist. So you always want to give your state, even if it's not loaded, some default values that end up making sense. Now let's just do one other thing here. What if we wanted to display some kind of message while it was loading so the user saw something? Well, what we could do is we could put a waiting flag here, and we could say waiting is going to be true. And we could destructure waiting, and we could go over here and say, hey, look, if waiting, which we're getting from the state, then let's just get out of here, and let's just return a React create element, and we'll put a div in, and let's just put in some text, wait for it. And if we do that, we'll see the wait for it, but we'll never see anything else. And that's because everything is reliant on state. So even though we ended up setting numbers, the other thing that we want to do here is that this is our object. We want to say we're no longer waiting, and we'll set waiting to false. So after we end up getting our data, again, simulating some call to some server somewhere to get some real data, we've got our waiting flag, and after a half second, we end up seeing our data.